So Donald Trump is at it again. Nobody's surprised at this point, but let's talk about it. As you guys probably already know, Donald Trump has decided that Canada should be the 51st states of America.
They should be the 51st state, really. It would make a great state. And the people of Canada like it.
And is actually threatening to annex us. Not with tanks, mind you, but with tariffs. To top it off, he referred to Justin Trudeau as the governor of Canada, which is just wildly offensive. Honestly, he makes Canada seem like we're just this polite, maple syrup, hockey playing, poutine eating territory of America, which is absolutely unhinged. Unsurprisingly, this has sparked such a huge conversation across Canada because honestly, everybody's mad. Like, I don't know a single person who is not angry by his comments. And I feel like the conversation that's being had right now isn't just about Trump, but about ourselves as well. This situation has genuinely stirred something in Canadians that is reminding us that we need to not rely on anybody but ourselves. We need to stop waiting for someone else to defend us or to validate us, and that it's genuinely time for us to take pride in our country and start acting like the strong, independent nation that we are. And honestly, while some of our leaders are genuinely stepping up, like we got Jean Chrétien, literally 91 years old, coming out to talk about the situation. And then we have other leaders who I'm like, are you sleeping right now? Like, where is your head? What are you thinking about? Why are you saying things that are so lackluster and genuinely have so many people looking at them sideways? So we're going to talk about that and just overall a lot of Canadians' responses to everything that Trump has been saying, as well as how this ultimately impacts us. So for full context, Trump, as he does, has been throwing just wild ideas into the air. He suggested that Canada should join the US as the 51st state, adding that economic force could make that happen.
But why are we supporting a country, 200 billion plus a year? Our military is at their disposal. All of these other things, they should be a state. That's why I told Trudeau when he came down. They send us a lot of other things that we don't need. We don't need their cars. We don't need the other products. We don't need their milk. We got a lot of milk. We got a lot of everything. And we don't need any of it.
That wasn't enough. He's planning on adding a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods. This move will not only devastate industries, but also cost 500,000 jobs for Canadians. So let's dive straight into different Canadian political leaders' responses to what Trump has said. Honestly, not to glaze, but Trudeau's responses have been absolutely elite. Like, I've never seen him this angry before in response to anything. And I will insert some clips, but I feel like he is not playing when it comes to making sure that he's defending Canada and Canada's interests, especially right now.
But my focus has to be not on something that he's talking about that will not ever happen, but more on something that might well happen, that if he does choose to go forward with tariffs that raise the cost of just about everything for American citizens, that on top of that, we're going to have a robust response to that. As we did last time, we are ready to respond with tariffs as necessary. You may remember when Donald Trump put tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, which did nothing but raise the cost of steel and aluminum for American consumers. It ended up causing a lot of loss in American businesses for whom Canada is their #1 export partner. We are the #1 export partner of about 35 different U.S. states, and anything that thickens the border between us ends up costing American citizens.
And I love to see Canadian politicians defend us in this way. But regardless, his response has been very clear. Canada's not going nowhere. He dismissed the annexation talk as a distraction from the tariffs, which he pointed out could hurt both countries. He outright said, we are going to stand firm, which honestly, for a country that is so often seen as being too nice and too polite and too this and that, I love that he took such a no-nonsense approach when it came to all of these threats of annexation and also the threats of the tariffs. And then we have the Conservative leader, Pierre. Yep, we do. He did say that Canada would never be the 51st state, but beyond that, his stance has just been so underwhelming. Like, anytime interviewers ask him, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on Trump's message about this? Or his response is always just, well, let me tell you about Trudeau. It's like, brother, you might be the next leader of the country. When people are asking you your thoughts on things that impact the entire country, maybe you should answer the question. Maybe you should be direct. Maybe you should actually let us know what you are going to do or what you would have done if you were in this position. Instead of constantly trying to shift blame on everybody else, can you let us know what you're planning?
We wouldn't have to give 100%, almost 100% of our hydrocarbons to the Americans at discount prices, and you wouldn't have had to ask me that question. So, frankly, the Liberals have got us in this mess by making us beholden to the Americans, and I will unite our people. We see right now that not only have the Liberals weakened our economy, now they're resorting to dividing our people, divide and conquer. Right when the president is threatening us with tariffs, what is the first thing the Liberal Party of Freeland and Carney think to do? Divide Canadians.
And yet, he's not saying anything as to how he's going to help if he was in office. So that's why I'm like, this is such an easy alley-oop, and yet he can't do it. He doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have any policies in place besides acts of tax, which we know is only going to benefit the oil executives. As of today, Pierre has been saying that just because America may potentially ban TikTok, Canada should also have TikTok banned.
This is ghetto.
Are we kidding? Like, genuinely, what is the thought process here?
And I've already ordered all of our Conservative MPs, senators, and our staff to stay away from TikTok altogether, stop using it. I'll be following the decision in the United States very carefully.
He's saying that we should follow suit. We are an independent nation. We need leaders who understand that, yes, Canada has its own backbone. We don't need to rely on anybody else. We don't need to rely on any other country. We don't need to follow the steps of any other countries because we are an independent country.
Period. Period. Period.
Instead of focusing on how to protect Canada's economy or even just counter Trump's rhetoric, Pierre's brilliant idea is to copy America's tech policy. And honestly, it's giving that kid that is cheating off of you during a test and is looking over your shoulder because they think that you're more capable than them. And yet they don't even change up the answers. That's what it's giving right now. The fact that he's like, yeah, we're just going to follow suit with what America's doing. That is a great way to prove how Canada could essentially become America's 51st state by not showing that we are an independent nation that can rely on its own two legs. Just seeing how different political leaders in Canada have responded to this has just been so juicy. Anyways, let's dive into the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet took a more combative approach, period. And honestly, he called Trump a bully, which is very much accurate. And he suggested that Canada fight back by shutting off mineral exports, which are very critical to America. That's the kind of energy Canadians need to see right now.
When Trump trash talks Canada, we got the leader of the Conservative Party repeating that garbage. That hurts Canada. That hurts Canadian workers. What we need to do is acknowledge that Trump is a bully. Bullies look for weakness. That's why he's trolling us. So we need to send a message of strength. We need to have a real war room ready to go, fighting for Canadian jobs. We need to put in place and get ready to put in place retaliatory tariffs. And that's not a fight that he wants. We have to show strength, that we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect Canadian jobs. We have to also make sure it's very clear that tariffs on Canada don't just hurt Canadians, it's going to hurt Americans. We need to make that message very clear, make sure the pain is felt, and so he knows this is not the direction he wants to go.
We have an example of a Canadian leader who's like, all right, we're just going to stop giving you all the things that you need for your country to even function. Period. I was like, that's what we're talking about. Standing up for ourselves instead of just hoping that things will blow over or just hoping that things will get better or hoping that Trump will forget. Absolutely not. We need to be like, don't play with us. Don't ruin a relationship that we've had for countless years at this point. Canada and America are such tight-knit allies, especially when it comes to imports and exports and just an economic relationship. And so for the next presidential leader to be threatening us right now, we absolutely should be biting right back. And then another example is the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. He kind of ate this. I'm gonna give him his ones for this. Ford mixed in some humor as well as some hard truths. Mind you, obviously he's not the leader of this country, but he is the leader of Ontario. And the fact that he, in his position, was like, try that with us and we'll try some with you right back. Okay. He joked that Canada should buy Minnesota and Alaska if Trump's dreams of taking over Canada come true. He pointed out some tea. He absolutely did point out some tea, and he was like, the US only wants Canada so that they can take our critical resources like uranium. And I was like, ooh, this is another good example of absolutely standing up for Canadians and actually defending us.
We need to be ready. We need to be ready to fight. This fight is coming 100%, but we will go to the full extent, depending how far this goes. We will go to the extent of cutting off their energy, going down to Michigan, going down to New York State, and over to Wisconsin. I don't want this to happen, but my number one job is to protect Ontario, Ontarians and Canadians as a whole, since we're the largest province. The consumer gets hurt. Canadians get hurt, but I can assure you one thing, the Americans are going to feel the pain as well. And isn't that unfortunate?
I was very surprised that it came from Doug Ford, considering that his track record doesn't seem to be on the side of the people of Ontario at all, ever. But this was finally one good example. And then another example is the Premier of British Columbia, David Eby. His response was very simple, very sharp. He was like, we're not becoming the 51st state, period. And that was that.
Canadians are proud. I'm proud to be Canadian. We are not becoming the 51st state. And I think that one of the recognitions of both Canadians and Americans is that we are different places. We have different priorities, and yet we're good neighbors and friends, and in many cases, family. And that there's no benefit that comes from hurting both sides of the border with the proposal that's been put forward. We should be working together.
Despite all that, I'm going to give you guys one of the best examples and one of the worst. So let's start with one of the worst examples. You guys have probably seen the news talking about Danielle Smith of Alberta. Oh my days. As the Premier of Alberta, a province that's deeply tied to Canada's identity as well as resource-driven economy, you would think that Danielle Smith would be a loud and proud defender of Canada's sovereignty. Instead, her reaction was genuinely the worst reaction I've seen to this entire situation. Rather than taking a strong stand towards Trump's blatant disrespect of Canada, she seemed more concerned about maintaining a good relationship with the US, particularly when it comes to Alberta's energy sector.
Because I think oil and gas is going to be key to being able to get a breakthrough once tariffs do come in getting them off.
One political watcher says Smith's strategy to go it alone could hurt Canada's position as a whole.
That if we don't stand together on this, we all stand to lose. We are becoming more vulnerable the more divided we are.
You see her out here giggling with Trump. She's flying out to go meet him. They're all giddy. Trudeau literally met up with all of the premiers, and all of the premiers agreed with the stance that they should take, besides Danielle Smith, only because of Alberta's resource-driven economy. What I wish you would understand is that, yes, it's so great that Alberta has oil, but what impacts Alberta will impact the rest of Canada. And what impacts the rest of Canada will impact Alberta. I don't know if she thinks Alberta is a completely different country than the rest of Canada, but that is not the case. You can't save Alberta by throwing the rest of Canada away. That's not how it works. Her primary focus was on the potential fallout of Alberta's economy, especially if Canada were to push back too hard. And obviously, economic concerns are very valid, but her approach to this was a mess. Genuinely 0 out of 10 stars. It felt as if her response wasn't to defend Canada's independence, but to make sure that Alberta's oil and gas sector stayed on America's good side. This play it safe attitude is not new amongst conservative Canadians. Many of them are so reluctant to challenge America's interests, even when those interests conflict with Canada's. Instead of offering a bold, uniquely Canadian vision, many conservative leaders tend to look southward for validation. A great example of that, as we just saw, was Pierre. Pierre saying, well, if TikTok is banned in America, I guess we should ban it in Canada too. which I'm like, again, doesn't make any sense. It's a big brother complex that often undermines Canada's ability to stand tall on its own. While leaders like Danielle Smith and Pierre might talk tough about defending Canada, their actions, or lack thereof, tell a completely different story. Canadians deserve leaders who will put the country's interest first, not ones who are afraid to rock the boat even when the boat is sinking. So enough of that nonsense. Let's talk about Jean Chrétien's perspective. The reason why we're going to talk about Jean is because if there's one leader who knows how to stand up for Canada, it was him. And was the Prime Minister and the leader of the Liberal Party as well from 1993 to 2003. And during that time, he earned the reputation of being bold, decisive, and unapologetically Canadian. He didn't just lead Canada, he defended it, often in the face of intense pressure from nations like the United States. One of his most iconic moments in his leadership was when he decided that Canada would stay out of the Iraq War in 2003. At the time, President George W. Bush was rallying up his allies and essentially telling everybody, we gotta go to war in Iraq. And Jean was like, I don't think we do actually. I think this is actually a nonsense war. I think we should not get involved in something that should not be happening to begin with. So Canada's going to stay out of it. He questioned the legitimacy of the war and refused to commit Canadian troops over there without evidence. It was honestly a very bold move, especially considering the immense pressure from the United States. But he stood firm, and in the end, he was right. And I'll also insert some clips of his response to Trump's threats of the annexation of Canada as well.
What has been going through your head as you watch him make those comments?
You know, it's not new that the Americans look at Canada. We even had a war in 1812, and we burned the White House. And for Mr. Trump, he does not realize that if Canada had been part of the U.S. a few weeks ago, he would have never become president because the Canadians would not have voted for him. And, you know, apparently he said this morning that he does not need our electricity. Fine. If he wants us to cut off the electricity, he will have to walk up the Trump Tower with candles to go to his office, you know, because the state of New York rely a lot on electricity coming from Canada, mainly from Hydro-Quebec. So it's not realistic.
His leadership was a reminder that Canada does not need to act like a junior partner to anyone. We can be strong, independent, and respected on our own terms. But with that being said, I honestly think there is a silver lining to all of this. I genuinely feel like this has woken so many Canadians up, which I'm very, very happy about. Trump's comments have ignited a national conversation as to what it means to be Canadian and why our sovereignty matters. People across the country are reflecting on what makes Canada unique, our values, our culture, our history. And some of them have even been realizing that we have been taking things for granted. This moment is a call to action. So many of us are recognizing that we can't just rely on external allies or politeness to secure our future. Canada's values, economy, and identity are worth fighting for. The best way to start is by ensuring that our leaders and our future leaders aren't just reactionary, but actually proactive in defining what Canada should be. With that being said, I'm very interested to see how things continue to change in Canada. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye-bye.